Are you sick and tired of having a period and you're contemplating taking birth control or other means of contraception to prevent it? Well, today I'm going to tell you why that might not be the best idea. My name is Brian. I've been in the health and wellness world now for 20 years. I've been coaching pro-metabolic health and nutrition for over 10. And today we're going to talk about the power of your period. The reason I want to have this conversation today, I was talking to somebody recently and they were using an IUD. If you aren't familiar with that, it's an intrauterine device. It's a means of implanted birth control that prevents you from having a menstrual cycle. And she was very happy that she was having no period at all, no menstrual cycle whatsoever, because she found it to be inconvenient. I get it. It's probably a pain in the butt to have a period every single month. I can only imagine, because I've never had one, but having worked with hundreds of women who have and have dealt with hormonal problems, the things I hear make me not envious of you women at all for having to deal with that. So thank you for putting up with that for the sake of your health. But there's a lot of benefits to a period. Just because it's inconvenient, just because it's a problem that you're dealing with, doesn't mean that it doesn't serve a key physiological role. In fact, it serves several. One of the big things that having a menstrual cycle does is it actually helps you to regulate your iron levels. When you have a normal menstrual cycle, when you have a period, you're bleeding. You're letting out extra blood, which is going to be one of the main ways in which your body is exposed to iron. Too much iron in the blood, too much iron in the body, you open the door to a lot of problems. A lot of neurological problems, a lot of skin problems, a lot of problems associated with the aging process. So as you have a natural release of this excess of blood, you're actually helping to make sure that you're not exposing yourself to a longer period, no pun intended, of exposure to iron. Second thing that you could get a benefit of when having a period is you have a natural hormonal cycle. You have ebbs and flows between your follicular phase and your luteal phase, in which at ovulation your progesterone levels will rise. Progesterone has been found time and time again to be very neuroprotective, meaning that this hormone that you make during a normal hormonal cycle will actually protect your brain, not just against future neurodegenerative diseases. They've actually linked your susceptibility to concussions based on the time in which the concussion occurs relative to where you're at within your menstrual cycle. And if the concussion injury happens within the luteal phase when progesterone is highest, you're actually going to experience shorter-lived symptoms and less severe symptoms overall. Progesterone is neuroprotective of the brain. Thirdly, one of the other unique things that happens when you have a natural menstrual cycle, you actually emit and detect pheromones differently. So what I mean by this is, and they've done research on this, women who are on birth control will actually sense the mate or sense the pheromones of their mate differently than women who are not on birth control. So what this would look like, if you've ever been in this situation or know anybody who has, you're on birth control. You're not having a normal menstrual cycle, and you get into a relationship. You find some guy that you find attractive, or woman or whatever, and you're smitten by this fella. But then you get off of birth control, and all of a sudden, things change. The spark is no longer there. You might even hate this person. What happens is that the hormonal changes that occur in the absence of birth control will actually hardwire your system to be on a different level of lookout for a more suitable mate. So birth control can actually interfere with your natural mate selection and pair bonding process. You might actually have a hard time connecting with a lasting relationship when you're on birth control. It's something to consider. Obviously not going to happen to everybody, but one of those key aspects of our reproductive function is to find viability and suitability with a potential mate. When you interfere with that process, you interfere with your natural ability to find that person that you want to be with more appropriately. And this carries into other areas of changes that women will experience and that men will be able to detect when women ovulate. So for example, there's actually research looking at how men will find women attractive based on where they're at within their cycle. They did a study. They gave men a bunch of pictures of different women that were at different phases of their cycle, some of which were ovulating, some of which weren't. These were just pictures, mind you. There was no movement, there was no voice, there was no intonation, inflection, anything, just a picture. And men then ranked how attractive they found those women's pictures accordingly. And what they looked at is that the women that had the highest level of attraction ratings were actually the ones that were in ovulation at the time the picture was taken. So just having that subtle change in pupil dilation or potential skin tone changes, men were able to pick up on those subconscious cues based on ovulation. So we're wired to detect these changes. And when you interfere with that with birth control, that can have a huge effect on interpersonal relations with potential mates, but also just people in general. Another fascinating study was done on exotic dancers, strippers. And what they found was that strippers reported higher levels of income earnings on the days in which they were ovulating. They go to work, they do their thing, they entice men to give them money, and lo and behold, the women that were ovulating made more money than the women that weren't. And those same women would then compare their totals to when they weren't in ovulation, and they would make less money. So the amount of money they made was directly tied to their hormonal and reproductive function. So what does this mean for you? What do you do with this information? The number one thing you want to think about is that your reproductive function is important, it is precious, and you should cherish it. Because if you lose it, you lose a major part of key biological functions that make you who you are. When you're under stress, when you're overtraining, when you're overexercised, when you're dieting too hard, one of the first things to go is your reproductive function. Your body is very good at saying you're not viable in the situation that you're in to carry on and reproduce. So we're going to shut down reproductive function to spare resources to try and keep you alive during this stressful time. We want to avoid that at all costs. And furthermore, we want to make sure that you have a menstrual period for as long as possible in your lifespan. Young people menstruate. Old people don't. If you're continually having a menstrual cycle, you're still youthful. It's a sign of your biological health. So we don't want to try and rush to be done with it. We don't want to try and expedite that process. We want to prolong that. We want to do things that improve our metabolism, improve our hormonal health. Things that will help to do that will help us to stay younger for longer. So if you keep that in mind and understand that your period, your menstrual cycle is actually super important, you start to think about things differently when it comes to measuring and monitoring your health. Hopefully you found this information fascinating. I love this kind of information. It is powerful, it is important, and unfortunately not enough people talk about it. If you want more information like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up, stick around, drop something in the comments, and I will see you guys later. Take care.